Hi everyone. This Illustrator tutorial is going to cover the image trace and live paint tools. You probably will hear me refer to image trace as live trace occasionally. That's what it used to be called in all previous versions of Illustrator, and sometimes I slip and call it the old name. So what image trace is a way for you to base a new drawing on an existing piece of artwork like a photograph or a hand sketch or something that is raster based. We talked earlier about the difference between raster and vector, raster being something like a photograph and vector being something like a line drawing. If you have something that is raster based and you want to be able to treat it like a vector or manipulate it like a vector, you can use the image trace tool. So what you need to do is first bring the kind of raster image into Illustrator. The way you do that, and the way that you would bring in any photograph or image, is by placing it. So under File, click on Place, and then it will ask you to choose where you have the image. So I have it in here, and it's called Sketch, and I'm going to place it. As soon as it pops up, I'm going to hit Place, and then it's going to drop it kind of onto my artboard. So this guy right now is a scan of a hand sketch. So if I zoom in, you can start to see some of the issues that I was talking about before with resolution, right? And this also speaks to the kind of anti-aliasing issue. So let me zoom in here. So if we were to scale this up, if we were to imagine zooming in and zooming out as scaling up and scaling down, you can see that from far away it looks fine, but from close up it looks pretty crappy. You can also start to see here what anti-aliasing does. So what that does, and this is a little bit off track, but is it takes the kind of darkest portion of the line and it tries to fill in the edges of where the stepping happens with lighter gray lines, so that when you zoom out to a reasonable distance based on the resolution, it starts to look like a continuous dark line. If it didn't have any anti-aliasing on, it would look pretty jagged. So anyway, the way that you turn this raster image into a vector image in Illustrator is through, like I said, a command called image trace. You can either object and image trace make, or you can choose this button here on the top in the command line. So it's converting it. Right now it doesn't look great, right? So it gives us a default, and this isn't what we would want if we wanted to turn that sketch into a drawing. What you can do now that the image trace has been activated is click on the image trace panel right here, and that is showing here over here in my panels. You can see here that there's a series of presets, so I could go through and kind of toggle, and it's going to take a minute to process, but it'll show, you know, the difference between some of the different presets. I'm going to stop that because we don't have a high fidelity photo. Excuse me. Hang on one second. Okay, so like I said, we stopped switching it to high fidelity photo because that's not really what we want. We could try sketched art and see where that gets us. It's going to take a minute to process. That's still not quite what we want in any way, really. So what I would suggest is that typically you're going to be using the advanced commands. What you can see down here is that you have a series of options. So the threshold, if we move that to more, is looking at the value for generating black and white from the object. So if we go all the way to more, it's going to be too much. It's going to turn everything into black. If we bring that down a bit, we start to get something that looks much closer to our original sketch. So it's, you know, it's kind of a contrast issue here. So if we start fine-tuning this, we can get something that looks closer and closer like our original sketch. You can see as I'm dropping down, I'm losing some of the lines. So where they weren't thick enough or where they weren't dark enough for the level that it's reading it at, it's gonna lose those lines. Paths take it's kind of the fitting between things. So the higher you set this, the more closely it's going to follow the original path, the less smoothing it's going to put into the path. So you can start to see that's the lines are becoming less smooth. It had been smoothing them out for me. The corners, again, are going to, the more high you have them, the more close to the original it's going to make them. And then the noise, the more you turn that up, the more original information is going to be in the drawing, the less it's going to try to filter out. Down here under Create, right now it's making a series of fills. What you really want is to have a series of strokes, in this case, because it's a line sketch. If it were a series of color fields, you would want them to be probably fills or some combination of the two. But we want this to be able to make lines at the end of the day. And here it's telling you the maximum width in pixels that'll be recognized and converted to strokes. So we want this to be as low as possible. So if we make this 1 or 0, so we actually don't want it to be as high as possible. We want it to be like 100. Let's see if that helps our case here. It's converting. Give it a minute. Let's hope it doesn't crash. Very slow progress on this one. The higher your threshold and paths and corners and all of those sorts of things are, the more information it has to process and the slower it's going to be. So the more we give it something to calculate, it's going to. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I have the hiccups. I apologize. The more information that we make it calculate, the longer it's going to take to process. So once we're happy with it, assuming we are, excuse me, I'm gonna just kind of do just a little more tweaking, which is going to take a while to update, and then we'll assume that we're happy with it. What we then want to be able to do is expand it, or turn it into, in the same way as with the blending, we want to turn it into something that we can actually use, or that we can actually do something with. And I'm going to give it a minute here while it's finishing up, and then not press that button again. I'm actually just going to stop this. So I'm happy with where it was. Stop. Let's move on. So we've got our strokes, and we've got all of these other things set. When we're happy with what it's looking like, you can expand the live trace, which turns it into a series of vector lines. It turns it into something that you can edit in Illustrator. So you can go in and treat it as if it were something that you had drawn in Illustrator, or that you had drawn in a kind of a CAD program and brought in, which is great. It means that you can take kind of hand sketches, clean them up, put them on your drawings, or your presentation boards, and have a lot more control over the lines, the quality of the lines, and those sorts of things than you would have if it were just a raster file. It doesn't work, it doesn't make sense in all cases, but it's something really good to know for the cases where you need to take something from from raster to vector form. So let's hope that this finishes up here shortly, so that we can see what our live trace looks like, or sorry, our image trace looks like. And you can see now that all of these objects have, I can go in and pick them one at a time with my direct selection tool. So I could go in and turn everything into a thinner stroke. So I can now treat it as if it were a line. So I can make it have a thinner line weight to it. I could make all of the lines a different color. So I could go into my swatches. Where are they? Swatches. And make them green for some reason. But basically I now am able to control them as if they were vector lines. The other thing that you can do now that your kind of sketch or drawing has been turned into a live trace is that you can use live paint with it. And live paint is, the live paint bucket is a way of kind of filling in different parts of an object that will kind of automatically kind of fill in for you some properties that you set in the fill and stroke settings. So if I want to fill in with red, oh, I'm sorry, I have to release this. I have to live paint make, and it will convert my live trace into something that I can live paint. So now I can take my live paint bucket, and when I'm looking at the top of the arrow, not where the bucket looks like it's pouring into, so sometimes it's a little bit tricky to tell what you're looking at. When I hover over different parts of the drawing, the red means that it's finding kind of a boundary that it can fill inside of. So live painting only works when you have a kind of a completely closed loop for something to fill into. So for instance, up here, I can't live paint any of these things because they're single lines, they're not connecting to each other. But if I get into something that is closed, I can live paint into it. What I'm live painting is the color, is the fill and stroke, so the properties that are currently in my kind of fill and stroke settings over here. So if I click here, it's going to fill it in pink and the outline's going to be black. I can do that all over the place. This is probably not the color that I would want to make this sketch, but you know, for sake of demonstration purposes. And you can use this rather than having to go in and kind of hand select things. It will let you fill in ranges of things at a time. And you can see that when you zoom in, you know, this whole kind of boundary has been filled in and it's kept its black line. So you can go in and do that. You can change the color to green or brown or something like that. And live paint bucket, I could go in and fill something else in with green. So this is a great, quick, easy way to kind of convert a sketch into something that you can manipulate in Illustrator. Again, it's not always the best solution, but it's a pretty powerful tool for the types of things that it does well. So that's pretty much everything. There are a couple of additional shortcuts in the kind of handout, the tutorial, if you want to go in and start fine-tuning this, but those are the kind of broad strokes, and that's all that you really need for now.